Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. Have you ever wondered about that moment, that precise moment when a woman begins to feel your absence, not just notice it, but ache for it? When the silence you leave behind becomes louder than the words you used to say, it's fascinating and painful how human connection works. Sometimes it's not when you're constantly present, giving, doing, that a woman feels closest to you, but when your presence becomes a space she can no longer step into. Maybe you've been there before, sitting quietly, scrolling through your phone, wondering if she's even thinking of you, questioning why she seems so distant, so unbothered. And yet something curious happens the moment you step back, withdraw with dignity, or return your energy to yourself. Suddenly her mind starts circling you again. Tonight we're going to explore this delicate and powerful paradox, the very psychology of missing. Why do women start missing you the most at unexpected times? What is it about your distance, your absence, your recentering of yourself that pulls at their emotions far more than your attention ever did? In this conversation we won't speak in clichés, we'll speak about intimacy, about space, about longing, about how you, as a man, create not only closeness but desire by understanding when and how a woman begins to miss you deeply. Let's imagine this together for a moment. You're sitting in a quiet cafe or maybe at home in the evening light, thinking about that woman who seems to have drifted away. Perhaps she doesn't text as quickly anymore. Perhaps she seems less curious about your life, less invested in the rhythm of your connection. You feel her slipping, and instinctively you want to grasp tighter, to lean in, to chase that connection back to where it felt secure. But here's something I want you to feel into deeply. Women start missing you the most not when you chase, not when you try harder, but when you stop filling the space between you so completely. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop trying to fix the distance, when you simply become comfortable again in your own presence, as if you're saying without words, I am enough with or without you. This is the first moment that often awakens a woman's longing. Not when you are readily available, but when you are no longer constantly available, when you begin to occupy your time with things that enrich you. When you return to your hobbies, your work, your friends, when you are present with yourself again. Women notice this shift more acutely than you might imagine. It's not about playing a game, it's about recalibrating your relationship with yourself. When you're fully centered in your own life, you create a kind of emotional gravity. A woman feels that gravity even when she doesn't want to admit it to herself. And that gravity is what draws her thoughts back to you, even in moments when she seems otherwise preoccupied. Think about this. A woman may appear indifferent on the outside. She might even tell you she needs space, but the very moment you accept that space without argument, without complaint, and you occupy it with your own peace, that's when something inside her softens. She begins to remember the feeling of being with you, not because you remind her, but because she feels the absence of the attention she once took for granted. And isn't this so human, so deeply part of the way we all relate to desire? We miss what is no longer immediately ours. We romanticize what we can no longer reach easily. We long for what seems slightly unavailable, what feels self-contained and sovereign. So if you're wondering, when does a woman start to miss me the most? It begins when you let go of the urge to persuade her, to explain your worth, to convince her of your value. When your energy turns inward again, when you become self-sufficient, self-loving, and grounded, you create emotional contrast. Now, let's go a little deeper into this emotional contrast, because it's not about going silent or becoming cold. It's about replacing the anxious need for validation with quiet confidence, when your actions are not loud, but your presence is felt. When you're no longer seeking reassurance from her, but simply existing as a man who knows himself. It's in this space that women feel the shift in the air around you. They sense your self-possession. your lack of neediness, your emotional independence, and suddenly they begin to remember the little things about you they overlooked before: your voice, your touch, your attention, your laugh. The absence creates space for memory to take shape. And here's something subtle but so important. Women start missing you not necessarily because you're gone physically, but because you've removed the energy of grasping, pleading, proving. That energy shift is powerful, and it speaks directly to the emotional body of a woman. It says, I am whole, I am grounded, and you are free. And freedom, paradoxically, is the gateway to desire. When you give her freedom without chasing, you make it safe for her to desire you again, not out of obligation, but out of her own genuine longing. So my invitation to you is this: instead of chasing when you feel distance, cultivate presence. Instead of asking why she's pulling away, ask yourself where you might have abandoned your own center. The more you return to yourself, the more magnetic you quietly become. And this magnetism is not something you declare. It's something she begins to feel on her own, in her own time, in her own private thoughts. Sometimes when she's alone, sometimes when she's scrolling through old photos, sometimes when she notices how effortlessly you have gone back to living well without bitterness or complaint. This is where missing begins. Now that we've explored this first dynamic, the moment when a woman starts to miss you because you return your energy to yourself, let's stay with this flow of intimacy and move gently into another layer of this truth: when a woman starts to miss the man who no longer reacts emotionally to her tests. You see, women start missing you even more when you no longer react to their emotional tests, and they do test, often unconsciously, because these tests aren't about manipulation or cruelty. They're about seeking clarity. Where do you stand? How strong are you in yourself? How steady is your presence really? Imagine this: she throws a sharp comment your way, something intended to provoke or unsettle you, and instead of defending yourself or raising your voice or proving a point, you simply remain grounded. You listen, perhaps even smile softly, and then you respond without aggression, or maybe you choose not to respond at all. You become a mirror reflecting back calm instead of chaos. This disarms her, not because you have won a battle of words, but because you've refused to engage in battle at all. And in that refusal, you communicate something profound: that your emotional state is not dependent on her moods, her tests, her provocations. You're not here to fight for your dignity, because your dignity is intact. When a man reaches this state, he embodies a quiet mastery, and a woman feels it deeply even if she doesn't say so. She may push harder at first, trying to find your edges, but the more you remain steady, the more she feels drawn to your calm. Why? Because in your refusal to be shaken, you create emotional safety, and emotional safety is the foundation of desire. It's in these moments, when she can no longer shake your ground, that she starts to miss what that stability brings to her life. She starts to remember how good it feels to be near someone who isn't swayed by every emotional storm, someone who listens without trying to fix, who allows space for emotion without absorbing it all. And the truth is, she may not even recognize this consciously. It may come to her as a sudden longing, a thought of you as she lies in bed at night, wondering why your absence feels heavier now than your presence once did. That's the paradox. Women miss the man who stands steady more than they miss the man who bends to every emotional demand. And let's talk about those moments when you once would have chased after reassurance, sought closure, or pleaded for understanding. When you now choose silence over argument, peace over proof, that's when you become unforgettable, because what you're showing her is that you trust your own worth, that you no longer need her approval to feel valuable. This is why women miss the man who withdraws not out of anger but out of self-respect. She starts to question, why doesn't he chase me anymore? Why doesn't he fight to convince me anymore? What is he doing with himself now that I'm no longer the center of his attention? And this questioning, this curiosity is fertile ground for desire to be reborn. It's not because you've withheld affection out of spite. It's because you've let her see that your emotional world is no longer controlled by her reactions. At the same time, you aren't cold or cruel. You remain warm when you're present. You're polite when you speak. You're kind but firm. That combination, warmth without weakness, presence without need, is magnetic. So if you're sitting there tonight wondering why your silence hasn't yet made her miss you, remember this. It's not about going cold. It's about going inward. It's about tending to your own garden, your own peace, your own energy. The man who can detach from the drama while remaining rooted in kindness and confidence is the man whose absence feels like a presence. And even if she doesn't admit it, even if her ego won't allow her to show it right away, she feels that absence like a weight. She feels your self-respect, she senses your emotional independence, and she starts to miss the version of you who no longer revolves around her moods. But let's go deeper still, because there's another layer to this mystery. Women begin to miss you most when you cultivate mystery itself. When you stop explaining everything about your life, your plans, your emotions. When you become a little more private, a little more self-contained, not hiding, but simply not offering everything up so easily. The less a woman knows exactly what you're thinking, exactly what you're feeling, exactly where your mind is wandering, the more her mind begins to wander toward you. And isn't this what desire really thrives on? A little space, a little curiosity, the unknown. When you allow a woman the space to wonder again who you are becoming, what you are feeling, what you are doing, that's when she begins to miss you deeply, quietly, persistently. She misses not just your body or your words, but your mystery. She misses the part of you that she can no longer fully predict or control. So I invite you, as we sit here in this intimate conversation, to recognize that the man who is missed is the man who doesn't need to narrate every detail of his inner world. He allows her imagination to fill in the blanks, and that imagination, my dear friends, is a powerful force. She will miss you most when you give her the space to imagine you again, not as the man who always explains himself, but as the man she's still discovering. And it's here, in this subtle space where you allow her to rediscover you, that another truth begins to unfold. Women start missing you the most when you begin building a life that feels full, even without her in it. Imagine that shift. Before, your days may have revolved around when she would call, when she would text, when she would want to spend time. You shaped your schedule, even your mood, around her availability, and then you step back. You begin to focus on yourself, your passions, your ambitions, your friends, your quiet moments of peace. Not because you're trying to make her jealous, not because you're performing happiness for an audience, but because you've decided that your life deserves to feel whole regardless of her presence. This is a profound moment of transformation, one that she feels even from afar. Suddenly, the man who once waited for her cues is moving according to his own rhythm. The man who seemed to orbit her attention is now centered in his own life. And something surprising happens in her mind. She begins to wonder how you are. Not just out of politeness or routine, but because she notices that you're no longer broadcasting your every thought and feeling. She feels the absence of your attention, and she starts to crave it again. It's not because she's playing games. It's because your energy has shifted from seeking her to being yourself. And when a man becomes fully himself, fully invested in his own growth, his own happiness, his own projects, there is an irresistible vitality that returns to him. He becomes attractive not because he's trying to attract, but because he's alive, and aliveness is magnetic. Women miss the man who becomes alive again. They miss the man who smiles without needing their approval, who laughs fully in the company of friends, who pursues his work, his health, his hobbies without waiting for permission or validation. And this is where your absence becomes powerful, not as a punishment, but as a reflection of your wholeness. You are no longer standing still waiting for her to return. You are moving forward. She might not reach out immediately. She may even stay silent for a while, but her mind is circling you again, revisiting memories, wondering where you are, who you are becoming. And this curiosity is the beginning of longing. Women start missing you the most when you no longer center your emotional world around them. When you treat yourself as a man who deserves respect and peace, regardless of whether she grants it, when you quietly reclaim your freedom, not freedom to hurt or betray, but freedom to live well. And as you continue down this path, something else shifts too. Your confidence begins to grow in a very natural, organic way. Not bravado, not arrogance, but a quiet confidence that comes from living a meaningful life on your own terms. You start to walk taller, you speak less but say more, you no longer feel the need to fill the space with explanations, justifications, or emotional apologies. Your energy becomes clean, grounded, and self-assured, and women feel this shift deeply. Even if she is the one who pulled away first, she begins to remember why she was drawn to you in the beginning. Perhaps she didn't feel your strength before because you were too focused on pleasing her, on proving your devotion. But now she sees you differently. She begins to see you as a man who respects himself enough to keep moving forward. In that respect you show yourself, that is what reignites respect in her. So if you find yourself in this space today, where you feel tempted to chase, tempted to reach out just to remind her that you care, I invite you to pause. Instead of seeking her attention, seek your own attention. Instead of asking how she feels about you today, ask how you feel about you today. How is your life taking shape? What makes you come alive again? What makes your days feel rich and meaningful, even without her? Because the man who is missed the most is the man who knows how to thrive on his own, the man who is self-possessed, self-loving, self-respecting. Not cold or distant, but deeply warm, yet unattached. And this is the paradox of longing, of desire itself. When you no longer need her presence to complete you, she begins to feel incomplete without your presence. So take this time not as a waiting period, but as a returning period, returning to yourself, to your purpose, your vitality, your friendships, your growth. This is where longing is born, in the quiet strength of a man who is fully himself, and in that quiet strength you become unforgettable. Not because you said all the right words, not because you explained your feelings endlessly, but because you cultivated a life that feels full even in her absence. And here's where everything comes together, almost like an invisible thread pulling through the quiet spaces between two people. Women begin to miss you the most when they realize you are no longer attached to outcome, when you live and love freely, without needing reassurance about how it's going to end. You see, there is something profoundly attractive, almost haunting, about a man who has released control over what happens next. When your energy says, I don't need to know whether you come back or not, I trust that whatever happens, I will be whole, that is when her mind starts to revisit you again and again. This is the final layer of longing. She begins to feel not only your absence, not only your self-sufficiency, not only your calm strength, but your emotional freedom. The freedom that says, I cherish connection, but I am not dependent on it for myself, worth. In this way, you no longer show up as the man who waits anxiously for her attention, but as the man who values himself enough to surrender to life's unfolding. You no longer ask, how can I win her back, but rather, how can I honor my own journey, whether she walks it with me or not? And women feel this shift in ways they can't always articulate. Sometimes it's a subtle discomfort inside them, because they sense they can no longer pull you back simply by sending a half-hearted message or a fleeting signal. You are no longer caught in the web of their mixed signals, you are untethered. This untethering, this freedom, makes you more desirable than ever before, because you are now a man who relates by choice, not by compulsion. You show up when you want to, not because you need to. Your time, your attention, your emotional energy have become precious, not because you made them scarce as a strategy, but because you've genuinely learned to value yourself again. This is the man who becomes unforgettable, the man who quietly embodies dignity, who can love without clinging, who can care without begging, who can desire without chasing. And let's be clear, this isn't about emotional detachment in a cold, hardened way. This is about emotional maturity. This is about stepping fully into your own emotional sovereignty so that any connection you share, including with her, becomes a choice from a place of fullness, not from a place of lack. When you reach this point, when your self-love has matured into self-respect and your respect has deepened into inner peace, that's when your presence lingers in her mind and heart long after you've walked away. She will start to remember how your voice made her feel safe, how your touch felt steady, how your energy felt grounding. Not because you're reminding her, but because she feels the void where your energy once lived. And the paradox is this: the more you let go of needing her to return, the more deeply she begins to miss you. She misses you because you are no longer trying to convince her of your worth. You've already convinced yourself. She misses you because you no longer orbit her mood swings. You've centered yourself in your own emotional balance. She misses you because your energy no longer pleads, it simply is. Calm, whole, undeniably present. And so, if you find yourself tempted to break this beautiful discipline, tempted to reach out just to see if she still cares, I invite you to pause. Not because you should play a game, but because every time you honor your own self-respect, you become more attractive in the deepest sense of the word. You become a man who is not easily forgotten, not because you begged her to remember you, but because your absence is now filled with presence, your own presence. A presence she can feel even when you're far away. So as we come to the close of this conversation together, I want you to know that you are not powerless in this dance of connection and longing. You are powerful when you return to yourself. You are powerful when you choose calm over chaos, dignity over drama, purpose over pursuit. Women miss the man who embodies that power, the power of quiet confidence, emotional maturity, and self-contained peace. They miss the man who no longer needs them to feel complete, because that's the man who gives them something real to miss. And my dear friends, as you sit with these truths tonight, remember that this is not about revenge or tactics or proving a point. This is about reclaiming your life as your own, so that any relationship you create is one of true freedom and mutual desire. You are not here to chase love, you are here to embody love, starting with yourself. So breathe deeply, hold your head high, and live your life fully. When you do, the right woman will miss you not because you demanded it, but because your presence became unforgettable, and your absence became a mirror she could not look away from. Thank you for sharing this intimate space with me today. If this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below, your experiences, your stories, your quiet victories. And if you haven't yet, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Intimacy Lab, because here we honor the subtle, the deep, and the beautifully human nature of our relationships. Here's to becoming the man who is missed, not because he chases, but because he lives so fully that he cannot help but be remembered,